Usually, when a nation comes into existence, the central government is invented first, and then the individual states join later. Or, as in the case with my home country of Canada, our government was agreed to form on a date much further in advance, alongside four of our provinces on the same date. However, that was not the case for the United States of America. The United States of America did not become a country with any form of government until March 4th, 1789, when the Constitution took into effect. This means that New Hampshire, whose state constitution took effect nearly 5 years earlier, is legally older than the United States. How did this happen? First, why don't I explain some background? The British colonized what would become New Hampshire in 1623. They named the region New Hampshire after the Hampshire region in England. We all know the story of how the revolution started. The Americans were upset with being taxed by the British without representation in their parliament. Even though the Tea Act of 1773 made tea cheaper, the Americans were tired of the British. Following the closure of Boston's port in May 1774, the New Hampshire Colonial Assembly defined the colony's royal governor by appointing a provincial committee of correspondence to coordinate with other colonies in resisting heavy-handed British policies. The governor responded by adjourning and ultimately dissolving the assembly, which in turn responded by issuing its own summons to meet. The Rogue Assembly called for the towns of New Hampshire to send representatives to what would become the First Provincial Congress of New Hampshire. 2 months later, that body met and voted to select delegates to the Second Continental Congress, apportion money to defray their costs, and recommended the towns raise funds for the relief of those affected by the Boston Port Act. The Continental Congress recommended that the New Hampshire Provincial Congress, quote, call a full and free representation of the people, and that the representatives, if they think it necessary, establish such a form of government as, in their judgment, will best produce the happiness of the people and most effectually secure peace and good order in the province during the continuance of the present dispute between Great Britain and the colonies. New Hampshire's delegates to the Continental Congress were pleased with the outcome, though they noted the government is limited to the present contest, a point with which they weren't too concerned, as, once we had taken any sort of government, nothing but negotiation with Great Britain can alter it. The Provincial Congress set to work drafting the Constitution, completing its work between December 21st, 1775 and January 5th, 1776. The Constitution was framed at a time when there was still at least some possibility of peaceful reconciliation with Britain. The government it created was only, quote, to continue during the present unhappy and unnatural contest with Great Britain. The Provincial Congress deferred to the Continental Congress, expressing that its members, quote, shall rejoice if such a reconciliation between us and our parent state can be effected, as shall be approved by the Continental Congress, in whose prudence and wisdom we confide. Moving to the federal level, on July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress agreed to sign the Declaration of Independence. However, from this point until 1781, there was no federal constitution of any sort to guide the nation. On March 1st, 1781, the Articles of Confederation went into effect. While this was a constitution to a degree, everybody knew it would have to be replaced as soon as the war was over. New Hampshire, as early as January 1776, became the first colony to set up a government, create a constitution, and declare war against Great Britain. But the Constitution explicitly stated, we never sought to throw off our dependence of Great Britain, meaning that it was not the first to actually declare its independence, as that honor would go to Rhode Island. New Hampshire's 1776 Constitution was the very first state constitution in America's history. However, even if we don't count this constitution, as we shouldn't due to the specific line, we never sought to throw off our dependence of Great Britain, the state of New Hampshire is still older than the country it is a state of. The 1776 Constitution was short-lived. Everyone knew that it was a rushed and temporary document used just to officially sever the ties between New Hampshire and George III. When the Revolution officially ended in 1783, All the states, with the exception of Massachusetts, who already had an official state constitution, as well as the federal American government, worked to create official constitutions. New Hampshire's official state constitution took effect on June 2nd, 1784, making that day the official day of New Hampshire's statehood of the United States. The United States itself wouldn't get its own constitution until September 17th, 1787, which took effect on March 4th, 1789, meaning that, legally, the American state of New Hampshire is 5 years older than the United States of America. Stick around for next time, where I go over how New Jersey was integral to the ratification of the Bill of Rights.